Good morning. My name is Erin Colburn. I'm the Pre-Health Advising Coordinator for the College of Health Sciences, and I'm excited to introduce to you Ms. Taylor Willis, an occupational therapy student at the University of Mary. She's a recent Boise State University alum, and she's going to be sharing some really great, fabulous information that will help you as you trek through your experience as a pre-health student or a student in general. Take it away, Taylor.
Thanks, Erin. So today we're going to be talking about sleep and rest. I think a topic that is incredibly prevalent in a lot of people's lives, college students, employees, young adults, older adults. It's an issue that a lot of people struggle with. And so I'm excited to kind of dig deeper and talk about it a little bit. But before we get into it, I have another crucial question about food. So are you a cake donut, which is on the left, the chocolate one, or are you a yeast donut person, which is on the right? Let me know.
Definitely yeast for me.
Good pick. I approve. I agree.
I got it right this time. Nice.
Yeast donuts. Cake is too much.
True.
We have some votes for yeast. We haven't gotten a cake yet.
Oh man, get out of here, cake donuts. I agree. Cake donuts are too much. I get tired of them. I can't handle it. It's just too much dough. It's too dense. So I approve of everyone's yeast donut. Good job. You all can stay again. Okay, so you're probably thinking, who are you? What is OT? So like Erin said, I'm previously an alum of Boise State, and then I went to the University of Mary for OT in my last year. And so occupational therapy started in the early 1900s, so it's a newer profession. It started around individuals who were mentally ill or disabled, and they were institutionalized or imprisoned, and so they just weren't doing very much. And so the focus of the profession was the therapeutic use of daily activities, or what we call occupations, hence occupational therapy, to promote meaningful participation in their activities. And so you just wanted to make people have things to do, things that they enjoyed, things that they loved and that were meaningful to them. And that promoted independence, right? It promoted joy. And so that's kind of the lens that I'm coming from. Everybody has different skills, everybody has different roles. All of those intermingle into your ability to successfully complete your activities for the day, right? And so that's kind of the focus of this specific session. So on average, how many hours of sleep do you get a night? So first, let's think about like a weekday. So when you're in school or you're at work, about how many hours of sleep are you guys getting?
Pretty close to.
Go ahead, Dalton.
Oh, I was just gonna say, probably somewhere between 7 and 8.
Okay.
More in there.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I get 5. I'm not very good. I'm not a good example for our students.
5? Oh my gosh. I could not function. I don't know how you get 5.
There's about 6 to 8, I'd say.
6 to 8. Okay.
Yep.
Depends, sometimes it wavers. Sometimes you go to bed later. Sometimes you actually get to go at a good time. Yeah. So it's still kind of all over the place. So what about a weekend? So Saturday, Sunday.
Same thing for me. 7 to 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I usually get less sleep on my weekends just because I stay up late.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense, right? You're like, I want to watch that Netflix show. I want to do this or that I couldn't do over the weekdays.
Which doesn't seem right, but that's how it usually is.
That's about how it's fallen.
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie, I have 3 kids. I still get 5.
That makes sense. Especially kids on the weekend. I knew how I was as a kid, so I can only imagine how 3 kids are. So that makes sense. But it's interesting that sometimes it differs, right? And sometimes it doesn't. I think some people have this notion that they want to catch up on the weekends. Some people get less sleep during the week. Sometimes it's the opposite. You think you want more sleep during the times where you're actually working, and then on the weekends. maybe you're having a little bit more fun, or you're doing more activities that you really enjoy, and that can affect your sleep as well. And so here's some different kind of surveys and things that I found. And so for my specific survey that I completed on pre-professional students, about 75% of students reported on average getting less than 8 hours of sleep. I don't think that's too crazy, right? I think college students, we assume that they don't get a lot of sleep. I was a college student. I'm sure Dalton can agree that sometimes you're staying up, like you're studying for that test, you're studying for your final, things like that. It's challenging. But that is 3/4 of the population that completed the survey. And so that's a majority of the pre-professional students. And then the middle one is about 60% of students were categorized as poor sleepers by the PSQI. It's basically just a questionnaire that kind of asks you, like, did you fall asleep like during the day? How did you sleep at night? How long did you sleep? And it kind of does this little algorithm. Well, that's a good word too. And so that's basically what it is. But about 60% of students were categorized specifically as poor sleepers. And so their bedtimes as well as like rise times were really delayed in the weekend. So they were having that kind of difference. And this was for medical students. And so there was a big difference between what their weekday looked like and what their weekend looked like. And abnormal scores specifically on this measure actually was correlated with a lower academic achievement. And so individuals that scored lower actually did worse in school. And so I think that's kind of an interesting comparison. People think they'll stay up, they'll do better on the test, but actually it's the opposite. Then the last one, emotional and academic stress is negatively impacts sleep. And so those things only contribute to your quality of sleep. So if you have tension, right, if you have stress, it's going to be more difficult to go to sleep. You got more going on in your brain. You have your body's feeling more tense. You can't relax, and that contributes to your ability to fall asleep. So let's talk sleep, right? So I think the main kind of word we're going to be using in this is quality. So our quality of sleep impacts the quality of all our other activities, right? So if we get a terrible day of sleep, we're going to have a terrible day. Or if we get a really good hour of sleep, we wake up early, we're feeling good, we feel more motivated, and we can maybe get more things done, right? And so sleep is essential. It renews our mental and physical health each day. We need it, right? We know if we don't get it, we're not going to feel too great. I love this phrase. I think the United States has like a cultural value of sleep isn't the most important thing. And so we live in a sleep sick society where we're go, go, go. I don't need to sleep. I want to do this. The more you do, the more successful you are. But it contributes to everything we do, right? If we don't sleep, we're not going to be able to be a good partner. We're not going to be able to be a good student. We're not going to be able to be a good employee. That affects everything. And so I think it's kind of a give or take, right? It's a scale. It's how much do I need to sleep? How much can I sleep and still get to be successful, right? Still get the things I need to get done. Because it's a disruption to our health. It's the largest and most health impacting occupational pattern in life. So we have this kind of routine. I'll talk about it in the next slide, but we have this day routine. And if that messes it up, then it messes up the rest of our routine, right? And it influences everything. I talked about that too. Our behavior, our interaction with the environment. If you're having a great day, we're going to have a great day. You got a good hours of sleep, you're doing great. But on the worst days, it affects all of those things. It can affect how we treat people. It can affect how we treat ourselves, right? And so this kind of goes into the circadian rhythms. And so this is the physiological 24-hour time period. So it kind of is like the structure of your day. And so you're alert and you're awake, and then you have energy dips, and that's normal in everybody. As a human, that is what happens. And so the pattern is actually set in childhood, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, sometimes I see the kids at like Walmart at 10 a.m. or 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, go to bed. Like, what are you doing awake? those things are ingrained in you as a child. And so if you are going late at night, you don't have a structured bed routine as a child, that can actually affect you as an adult, which I found kind of interesting. And so the specific kind of topics that kind of, or the specific, everything that's the same between everybody is that mornings you're more alert, right? You're going to get more done. You're more cognitively focused. That's the best time to get things done, surprisingly, if you're not tired, right? And then everybody has an early afternoon dip. I feel like mine hits at 3 p.m. every day. It might be like a 2, a 1, depends when you kind of eat lunch, right? But everybody has that dip. And then you have energy for the rest of the day. So your body can keep you up, right? You can stay up. You're not like done at 3 o'clock and like you're falling to like asleep for the rest of the day. You may take a nap. I'm guilty of that. I did that yesterday. I took a nap at like 3 o'clock, but your body will be able to have that energy for the rest of the day. And then when it's nighttime, right? When it's dark, we're going to sleep. So that's kind of the specific kind of cycle that everybody goes through, right? It's universal across every human being because that's just how our body works. Okay. And so how is it linked to occupation? So our daily routines are built into this, right? So we're not going to be getting dressed while we're sleeping. We're not going to be going to the bathroom when it's for 3 when we're sleeping. You know, we envelop this routine specifically around that. And so if you have an atypical rhythm, then it increases your likelihood of poor quality of sleep and a disrupted routine. That makes sense. So if we don't have a routine, right? If we are just kind of like willy-nilly, we're going through it, where we have no structure, then we're probably not going to get the best quality of sleep. We may not be able to catch up. We may kind of get like the sleep debt, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And it's just going to be more challenging on us. And so I think it's also important to understand our risk to being prone to the disrupted rhythms. And so shift workers, right? New moms, those with chronic illnesses, the mentally ill, individuals with head injuries, and then individuals who are blind actually are more prone to those specific rhythms. And so specifically with like shift workers, like nurses, police officers, firefighters, those people who are getting really inconsistent sleep, right? They may not work as much, but if you're working nights, there's a lot of evidence that shows that actually can take years off of your life, and it contributes to your health, right? Because sleep and health is connected. And so if you are having this inconsistent rhythm, you're sleeping during the day, and you're staying up late at night, and it's just a different type of rhythm than our body is used to, it actually can negatively affect your health. My dad was a police officer. My brother is a paramedic. And so like I see this a lot with them. They were exhausted. They have different routines to where our lives were affected because of it, right? We can't do this because he just got off work. We can't do something too early. I couldn't have friends over, right? As a kid, that drove me crazy if he was sleeping or worked the next day. I couldn't have my friends over because it'd be too loud. Those things affect not only the person, but it also affects them, right? And so that's some kind of things to think about, that as we kind of get through life with different illnesses or these other individuals, that they can really be prone to having disrupted rhythms. And so also with this, the circadian rhythms link with light, right? That makes sense. When it's light outside, you're feeling awake. But when it's dark, that's when we get really sleepy. During the winter, when it gets like dark at 5 o'clock, you're gonna get really sleepy really quickly. I feel like we go to bed a little bit earlier than in the summer when Boise is still light outside at 10 o'clock at night, right? And so that's a neurological cue. So when it's dark, melatonin is released, right? That hormone in our body that helps us go to sleep. Our body relaxes, our brain function slows down. And then when the light happens, it causes our histamine receptors to wake our body up. And so with that, that's why kind of the shift workers and things like that have a really difficult time sleeping, because of that kind of light switch that is a neurological cue. And so I love this video. This is a video that kind of goes into how much sleep do we actually need and some other research that kind of backs it up. And so I will pull this up. And then give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. Okay. Should I turn it up? Okay.
Tired? We all know the feeling. Irritable, groggy, and exceptionally lazy. Chances are you didn't sleep enough last night, or the past few nights. But what exactly is enough sleep? And more importantly, can you ever catch up on it? While the very function of sleep is still debated by scientists, we do know that it's necessary to function efficiently and productively. After all, we spend 24 years of our lifetime sleeping, it'd better be important. Researchers have tested how much is required each night by assigning groups of people to 4, 6, and 8 hours of sleep over extended periods of time. After 14 days, those with 8 hours of sleep exhibited few attention lapses or cognitive issues. However, those with 6 or 4 hours of sleep showed a steady decline. In fact, after only 2 weeks, the 6-hour group showed a similar reaction time to a person with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.1%, which is considered legally drunk. The 4-hour sleepers suffered even more, occasionally falling asleep during their cognitive tests. In both groups, brain function decreased day by day almost linearly with no sign of leveling off. Scientists have dubbed this cumulative effect as sleep debt. So can we recover from it? After a night or two of little sleep, studies show that the body and brain can fully recover with a few nights of good sleep. However, with long-term sleep deprivation on the scale of weeks to months, the recovery of cognitive function is much slower, requiring many more nights of quality sleep. On the timescale of months to years, it's unknown whether brain function can be fully repaired or if it causes permanent damage. Paradoxically, with chronic sleep deprivation, your sleepiness or how tired you feel does eventually level off, meaning that you become less and less aware of your objective impairment over time. So, how long should you sleep? Most studies tend to show that 7 to 8 hours of sleep is the average ideal for humans. Apart from the cognitive issues, individuals who consistently sleep less than 7 hours a night have an increased risk of heart disease, obesity, and diabetes, not to mention a 12% higher risk of death. On the flip side, studies have shown that while sleeping more than 8 hours does not impair brain function, it also carries an increased risk of heart disease, obesity, and diabetes, and a 30% increased risk of mortality. So, too much sleep may also be a bad thing. But variation most certainly exists, and our genetics play a large role. In fact, individuals genuinely unaffected by only 6 hours of sleep were found to have a mutation of a specific gene. When scientists genetically engineered mice to express this gene, they were able to stay awake for an extra 1.2 hours than normal mice. It turns out these short sleepers have more biologically intense sleep sessions than the average person. Ultimately, while it's important to know the ideal average of 7 to 8 hours exists, let your body and brain help you figure out its own needs. After all, no one shoe size fits all. If you want to know how to get better quality sleep each night in order to conquer the hurdles of sleep deprivation, we have some tips and research for you over on ASAP Thought.
Okay. And so kind of after watching that, is there anything that surprised you guys?
Yeah, with the short sleepers, I had thought that they just had shorter sleep cycles. I didn't realize that they had normally like length sleep cycles that were just more intense. So that was interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think I found that sick people who got consistently 6 hours of sleep were functioning at basically an alcohol level of legally drunk. Like that was a weird fact, I feel like. It's strange how linked that is, right? That you are that cognitively impaired or foggy just throughout the day based off your sleep. Anybody else? No? I also think too much sleep, like that blew my mind too. Like getting 9+ hours of sleep, that can really affect your health as well. Like who would have thought that too much sleep can actually really affect you? So kind of that leads into sleep and health, right? It's all linked. And so our ability to sleep directly impacts it. There is a really strong connection. And so it can suppress our immune system. So if we have sleep deprivation, our quality of sleep is not very great, it can actually cause a loss of thermoregulation in the body. And so with different life events, right, our self-perceived levels of stress can actually be really big predictors of our health. And so if we are having psychological stress, our daytime sleepiness, we're having poor quality of sleep, not necessarily quantity. So we could have 8 hours of sleep, but it might be terrible sleep, right? It might not be a good kind of night, right? It's negatively associated with our health. And if it specifically impacts our immune system, then it's going to affect everything else, right? If we're sick, we're not going to get better. It's going to take longer. All of that influences it. And so kind of the role of sleep. So fever pushes pathogens out of our body, right? So when we're sick, we have a fever. That's our body's way of coping with whatever's happening. And it helps us to push those things out. It also causes us to sleep. And so if our bodies are trying to sleep, right, it's telling us something. If you're feeling tired and you've gotten great quality of sleep, you're not feeling too well, that's our body's ability to tell us like, hey, you need to rest so that we can produce an increased supply of your immune defenses. And so that's kind of that link that I don't think I necessarily knew, right, as a student. And with that being said, our health and like our immune system and how we're feeling, that can be linked to our cognition, right? And so if we have decreased cognition, kind of like the article was saying, a slower reaction time, right? Lower performance on IQ tests, irritability, like our ability to solve problems, right? We might be having a hard time focusing, we're fidgeting, we're really moody, different things like that. That also our sleep affects that as well. So not only is it affecting our immune system, our ability just to kind of be a human, right, be healthy and just attend throughout the day, it also affects our cognition. And so this next video, I have another one that actually talks about sleep and immunity specifically. And I think it's super interesting.
Body response. So in other words,
you can see I watched
when
it
we're
already.
sick,
So.
typically what we want to do is just curl up in bed and go to sleep. And in part, what we're trying to do is sleep ourselves well, because there's a very intimate association between our sleep health and our immune health. We know that individuals reporting less than 7 hours of sleep a night are almost 3 times more likely to become infected by the rhinovirus, otherwise known as the common cold. We also know that women sleeping 5 hours or less a night are almost 70% more likely to develop pneumonia. But we've also discovered that sleep can play a role in your successful immunization. So in one study, they took a group of individuals and they limited them to 4 hours of sleep a night for 6 nights. And in the other group, they gave them a full night of sleep each and every one of those nights. And then during that time period, they gave them a flu shot. And they measured the response to that flu shot. What they discovered is that in those individuals who were sleeping just 4 hours a night, they went on to produce less than 50% of the normal antibody response. So in other words, if you're not getting sufficient sleep in the week or the days before you get your flu shot, it may render that vaccination far less effective as a consequence. What this tells us, and now what we're starting to learn, is that it's during sleep at night, including deep non-REM sleep, when we actually restock the weaponry within our immune arsenal. We actually stimulate the production of numerous different immune factors. And furthermore, the body actually increases its sensitivity to those immune factors. So you wake up the next day as a more robust immune individual. So when it comes to your immune system, you should perhaps think of sleep as one of the best health insurance policies that you could ever wish for.
Decades of record-setting hits.
Okay, maybe. All right. I thought that was super interesting, and I think he kind of said it in a really beautiful, cohesive way, that there is a strong correlation, and that I think that study is just like mind-blowing, and it makes you think of even the coronavirus, right? that has an impact. So are individuals getting sleep? Are we thinking about those other consequences as we're starting the vaccination process? I think that is really interesting. Does anybody else have anything kind of to say about that, or something that they found interesting?
That's what I was going to add. I was just wondering, like, what the sleeping statistics with the coronavirus immunity. I think that would be a really interesting study. Another thing is just like personally, I remember I used to do some back in college. I did some undergraduate work, and I did overnights, and so my sleep schedule was all over the place. And I just remember during those times, I would get sick almost like every time, like get a little cold or something after that. So it does definitely impact that from my experience anyway.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think you don't think about it instantly, right? You're kind of like, oh, I got sick, or it's like, it's winter, right? I probably got it from a desk or a table or someone at the grocery store, right? You're like, oh, I got the cold again, or I got the flu. But it does impact it. And I think sometimes we're more susceptible, or we don't really think about sleep as being this huge factor. I think that was an interesting kind of plug at the end. And he's like, it's the best health insurance policy, right? It is directly linked to your ability to fight those illnesses.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I know. I wonder if they'll do any studies on the coronavirus, as I don't know. It's not I'm sure sleep in that is not the most prominent thing that they're trying to research right now, but it would be really interesting in the future. Okay, so then we'll kind of go into the stages of sleep. I find this stuff really interesting. And so for the NREM, right, your non-rapid eye movements, you have 4 different stages that you kind of go through. And so this is the longest portion of your sleep. This is kind of what you're doing the most. And so stage 1 is like very, very light. You're dozing off. You're feeling that kind of just sleepiness kind of take you over. And then it kind of moves into stage 2, which is when your brain starts to slow down, right? You're feeling it starting to relax, and you move deeper into sleep. And then stages 3 and 4 is your deep sleep. That's when you have your best rest. So your immune system is producing the protective metabolic components, right? So that's when you're getting that major influence. So then we go into REM sleep, or your rapid eye movement sleep. You have really high brain activity during this moment, right? So it's there's MRIs that show that this is similar to you being awake. So your brain activity is basically turned on, and you are awake within the actual activity. This only happens about 5 to 6 times a night, but this is where dreams occur, right? So this is when we're having those dreams or those nightmares or anything like that. And so REM sleep actually helps us reorganize our brain. And this is kind of reconstitutes it. And so something else I found interesting is you have no body movements below your neck. So I feel like my best sleep is when I don't move, right? You fell asleep and then you wake up and you're like in the exact same position. You're all cozy. That is kind of during this REM sleep, you don't move, which I found really interesting. But your body also stops regulating your temperature. And so when you wake up sweating, right, from a dream, or you're freezing, that is kind of usually during REM sleep, because your body just can't regulate itself, right? So I found that really interesting, that even though you have really high brain activity, that your body's thermoregulation actually isn't really doing anything. So I thought that was kind of an interesting give and take. And so if you're a visual person, I really like this. I'm sure you've probably seen this if you guys have like Apple Watches or like Fitbits that track your sleep, or any kind of external thing that tracks your sleep. It shows you kind of the different peaks and valleys that you fall into as you sleep. And so you can kind of see the different wake. You go through the NREM sleep. You kind of go up and down. And then you have REM sleep, the closest to awake, right? And that makes sense. Your brain activity is really similar. So usually at this time, you're at that higher peak of you feeling awake. And then it kind of goes back down, and you go into this kind of routine of different things. And then you'll have different stages of like being awake. Sometimes those like external monitors and things they'll say you're awake a lot, even though maybe you don't feel like it. And so that's just kind of them trying to understand what your body's going on. It can't be in your brain, right? So it can't be 100% accurate, but that's kind of the natural flow. And then as you get closer to your 8 hours of sleep, right, you're not going to be going into those deeper stages. That's really in the beginning, and it stays a little bit more superficial within the lighter sleep. This is a different graphic. If you like this kind of shows more of the cycle as you kind of go through it and the different things that are happening in your body. And so just kind of depending on how you receive that information, I thought this was also an interesting one to kind of depict the exact same stuff. And so earlier I talked about sleep debt, same with the first video that we talked about. It's the physical condition of tiredness due to inadequate sleep, right? It's our kind of, we slept 6 hours, so now we're kind of in a debt, right? We want to catch up so that we are back in that consistent 8 hours. And so that's basically what sleep debt is talking about. And so it's specifically a lack of REM sleep. And so it's that kind of sleep that helps reset everything and kind of reorganize our brain, right? A lot of people see this during daylight savings. I found a statistic that says there's a 7% increase in accidents the week following daylight savings when we lose an hour, because people, they just can't catch up. I think some people have a routine, right? You lose an hour, you can't really catch it up because it always happens a Sunday, right before we start the traditional work week. And so it's interesting to see that there's a correlation to an increase in accidents during that time because we're so tired. This is also really prevalent in adolescence, right? It makes sense. This is really common within the college student community. I think you're like, okay, well, I have a test this week, but then next week I'll be okay. Like I can catch up. So you're staying up till 3 o'clock. You're waking up at 6. Kind of that inconsistent routine that some people have. That just constitutes being a college student, right? You have to study, you have to do well on the tests, you have to pass your classes. And so that can contribute to kind of sleep debt. But the thing about sleep debt is it actually can build up, right? So the more debt you get into, like a credit card bill, the more stuff you buy, you're going to go in more debt. And so it exerts wear and tear on the body. So if you're constantly putting your body in sleep debt and kind of going in this routine of I'll get 5, 5, 5, 8, 8, 5, 5, 5, 5, or even like 4, 3, you're really inconsistent. It actually has been shown to influence your memory, right? And so there's a big link between your like pituitary gland and your hypothalamic area in your brain. It affects your memory. So if you aren't getting the right amount of sleep, then you're not registering that information that you learned, right? You're not organizing it in your brain. You're not setting that within your short-term, your long-term memory and those different processes. And that affects your ability to be a student, right? The research that we showed in the beginning showed that people who qualified as poor sleepers actually had poor academic performance. And so there's that big link that people think I'm going to stay up and study and it's going to help me, right? The more hours, the more information I can shove in my brain, but it's not true. It's actually the opposite, that you're not allowing your brain to register that information to do better on that test, right? I don't think I learned that till grad school. I went to bed at 10 o'clock every day. I didn't care. I was like, what am I going to learn, right? I would go to bed. I wouldn't stay up past 11. And I did great I did a lot better in the test than I did in undergrad. And it blew my mind. And so I hope that people kind of see that little caveat and kind of be like, oh, maybe I need more sleep, which you do. And so this is the last video that I kind of found. I just love videos. And so I thought this is a good opportunity to pull them in. This one is sleep and emotions. I think it's the same guy that talked in the second one. Also love his comb over. If you didn't notice it, this one, you'll notice it in this one maybe. But this is kind of the link with our emotions.
So exactly how does a lack of sleep impact our emotional brain? Why does that lack of sleep make us so emotionally irrational and hyperreactive? Well, several years ago, we conducted a brain imaging study. And we took a group of healthy adults and we either gave them a full night of sleep or we sleep deprived them. And then the next day we placed them inside an MRI scanner. And we looked at how their emotional brain was reacting. And we focused on one structure in particular. It's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is one of the centerpiece regions for the generation of strong emotional reactions, including negative emotional reactions. Now, when we looked at those people who'd had a full night of sleep, what we saw was a nice, appropriate, moderate degree of reactivity from the amygdala. It wasn't as though there was no response at all, but it was an appropriate response. Yet in those people who were sleep deprived, that deep emotional brain center was in fact hyperactive. Indeed, the amygdala was almost 60% more responsive under conditions of a lack of sleep. But why was that the case? And what we went on to discover is that there's another brain region that's involved. This brain region is called the prefrontal cortex, and it sits directly above your eyes. And you can think of the prefrontal cortex almost like the CEO of your brain. It's very good at making high-level executive top-down control decisions and reactions. In fact, it's one of the most evolved regions of our brain. And one of the parts of the brain that it controls is this deep emotional center, the amygdala. Now, in those people who'd had a full night of sleep, there was a nice, strong communication and connection between the prefrontal cortex, regulating that deep emotional brain center. But in those people who were sleep deprived, that communication, that connection between the prefrontal cortex and that deep amygdala emotional brain center had essentially been severed. And as a consequence, the amygdala was responding far more reactively due to a lack of sleep. It's almost as though without sleep, we become all emotional accelerator pedal and too little regulatory control brake. And that seems to be the reason that we become so unbuckled in terms of our emotional integrity when we haven't been sleeping well. So that's the bad that can happen if I take sleep away from you. But it turns out that there's something good that happens when you get your sleep back. And sleep, particularly rapid eye movement sleep, actually offers a form of emotional first aid, because it's during sleep at night that we take these difficult emotional experiences that we've been having during the day, and that sleep acts almost like a nocturnal soothing balm, taking the sharp edges off those difficult experiences. And so perhaps it's not time that heals all wounds. It's time during sleep that provides that form of emotional convalescence, so that when we come back the next day, we're able to cope with those emotional memories.
So I thought that was really interesting too, because I think I love putting specific research, right, or specific words to how I'm feeling. And so when you're not getting sleep, I think a lot of us we know when our body maybe isn't feeling the best, right? We know when maybe our emotions aren't in the place we want them to be. We're a little bit more irritable. We're a little bit more short with people. We have a shorter fuse, right? A shorter temper. And so I think it's interesting that there is that link. There is that reason our body is doing that. And so that's why I kind of liked that video, that it really does influence our ability to manage our emotions, which also helps us manage like our stress, right? It helps us cope with those stressful things that happen in our life, and that sleep can really benefit that. And so now we'll kind of go into a activity a little bit. And so as we were kind of talking about sleep, right? For Dalton, it was a lot more consistent, but same with Erin, right? Not consistently long, but she was getting consistent hours of sleep. And what I think I see with a lot of people is kind of this sleep debt, right? And so Monday, like you're feeling great, you're feeling awesome. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to catch up. I need to figure out this sleep debt. And so if we're kind of looking at it, so for maybe Jennifer or Ian, if you guys want to comment, how does your weekend versus weekday look like? You know, you have to like reflect. You're like, I don't know, what does it look like?
I'd say for the most part, I'm pretty consistent about going to sleep around like 11:30,
Mm.
kind of regardless of the night. There's some later nights than others. Definitely on the weekend, I wake up a lot later.
Yeah, for
But
sure. Thanks for sharing.
Same with me as well. I wouldn't say my schedule from weekday to weekend is that much of a difference or inconsistent. Obviously weekdays I'm waking up earlier, probably staying up like the same time, and during weekends I may be waking up a bit later or just staying just a little bit later than I do weekdays. But other than that, not really that big of a difference.
That's good. I love that a lot of people have consistent routines because there's a lot of research that shows that kind of wavering, that sleep debt when you're like, I'm gonna get 5 hours, 5 hours, 5 hours, and I'm gonna get like 10, 10, 10. That actually can negatively affect your health too, right? So that's part of that kind of sleep balance, that you don't want too much, you don't want too little, you want that consistent kind of level. And so as we're kind of talking about it, what are your guys' bedtime routines? So what is kind of the 2 hours leading up to you falling asleep that either helps you or maybe you don't have a routine? Do you guys want to talk about that a little?
my sleep routine is absolutely horrible at night. It is bad. I'll lay in bed with my girlfriend and we'll watch TikToks kind of until we doze off.
TikTok. Oh no.
Yeah, it's not good. But
That TikTok time just like flies past you. You have
Yeah.
no idea how much time has passed. That's a deep hole. I get in the TikTok hole too. But okay, so you just kind of you have some, you relax, right? You hang out with your partner and then you guys kind of slowly doze off while on your phone. That's
yes.
okay.
For me, mine's actually pretty consistent, no matter weekend or weekday. Like I like having time to just kind of be able to wind down, like getting ready. And then I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I do spend time on my phone, but when it's time, like I'm getting tired, I'll put it next to like what the table that's near my bedside, and then I sleep pretty easily. So that's why I have such a consistent just bedtime routine. So it's pretty easy for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful point that usually people, I think people who actually get great quality of sleep, and like you said, you feel like you can fall asleep really easily, you get greater sleep. And so then there's also this other population that have like insomnia, right? And have a really difficult time falling asleep. I mean, my parents take melatonin like every night because they can't fall asleep without it. And so they have a difficult time staying asleep. And so that's kind of an interesting little note that I think is really interesting, Jennifer. Thanks for kind of going into that.
So Dalton, what are your sleep routines 2 hours before?
Oh, sorry, I got kicked out of the meeting. I was trying to figure out what the question was before I answered. Good question. Let's see. So it varies a little bit. Sometimes I'm out late with people before I'm going to bed, like closer to me going to bed than 2 hours. And those times I basically just, I come home and then I immediately get ready for bed and then I just go to bed. When that's not the case, generally speaking, I'm either doing homework or hanging out with my family a couple hours before bed. And then probably within an hour, I like actually get ready for bed. And then I hang out in my bed for a while, set my phone to night mode and just watch Netflix for a little while.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, once I'm ready to go to bed, then I just turn it off and go to sleep.
Okay, that's a good routine, right? You have this system, right? You have this kind of process that you go through, and it sounds like you actually kind of the last hour, it is a lot more relaxing. You spend time on Netflix, it works for you, and that's usually kind of what soothes you to go to bed.
Yep, that's
Nice.
about right.
Yeah, I don't have much of a routine either. I don't get in my bed until I sleep. I think that's a big thing that helped me is like when it's cold, like a fresh bed. I love it, and that's gonna help me go to sleep quicker than if I've been laying in bed. And so I actually don't get into bed till right before I fall asleep. I always shower. I'm a nighttime shower. I love it. I will always do it. I won't get into bed dirty. And that's just kind of my routine that I kind of do. And so basically what our routine is kind of like sleep hygiene, right? And so we have morning hygiene. We gotta get ready, right? We gotta smell good, gotta put that deodorant on. We have to have some hygiene in the morning, but then our kind of bedtime routine is our sleep hygiene. And so it's kind of we all need these healthy sleep habits, right? This healthy sleep routine to contribute to our quality of sleep. And so for some of us, we have a routine. It maybe isn't so strict, right? It's going to be different every single day, but our general routine is a specific task, right? But if we develop a routine that just ensures that we don't add things and we don't subtract things that we need, right? We don't add things we don't want and we don't subtract things that we don't really or that we really need. Um, then we can make sure that our routine is really positive. And so before we even feel sleepy, right? So before we're kind of getting into bed that last hour, we should be doing quiet activities. And so reading a book, staying away from a screen as much as we can. I know it's challenging, or even putting it in night mode, like Dalton said. I think that's a really good idea is turning the brightness down because light does affect our sleep, or going in night mode to where you're not getting as many notifications or texts or things like that. So quiet activities, avoiding alcohol, warm bath that has shown to be really beneficial, not hot. So you don't want to take a really hot shower or bath, but warm helps to kind of calm your body down. And then exercise 2 to 3 hours prior. Exercise is an arousal activity, right? It gets you excited. And so you don't want to do it too close to sleep, but 2 to 3 hours has shown to be beneficial. And then some other helpful hints that can kind of contribute to that routine is staying in bed when you're awake is counterproductive. And so if you've been up for like 15 to 35 minutes, get out of bed. Get out of bed, go do a quiet activity, read a book. I studied in undergrad or in graduate school, so I'd grab my little notebook, I would start reading, and I'd be like out in like 2 minutes, right? No one wants to study. And so I would do that, right? I'd get up, I'd go to my desk, I'd like read a few things and be like, yeah, I don't want to do this. Let's go to bed. And I would go to bed. But that it's getting up, it's getting out of that specific kind of area you are, get out of bed, kind of do a quiet activity until you're feeling sleepy, and then you're going to be more able to go to bed. And so that's kind of a helpful hint that I actually learned in grad school from one of my professors, and it actually really helped. Avoid watching TV. I think this is up to you. If you're watching TV at this super big brightness, your lights are on, right? You're not going to feel sleepy. But if it helps you feel tired, I think like a softer movie with a low light and low sound can actually help you. And so it depends kind of who you are. And then removing clutter in your room at all. So if your bed is like covered in your textbooks and your different assignments and things like that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to fall asleep. And so kind of using these different tips, how do you think you can improve your sleep?
I definitely think for me that not hanging out in bed a while before I go to bed would probably be good.
Yeah.
Um,
Adding that into your routine.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's probably the biggest thing for me. Not watching a lot of TV and stuff right before I'm going to bed, that too. Because when I'm hanging out with my family, we spend a lot of time watching movies. So that normally ends up being the thing that we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else? Okay. Well, some other ones, if you can also use like a smartwatch, so sleep technology, understanding that quality of sleep and what you're getting, kind of bringing attention to that can actually be helpful in improving your sleep, right? So if you're like, oh gosh, I'm not getting a lot of REM sleep, or I'm staying up too much, or I'm just like in my light, I'm not getting into my deep sleep. That watch can bring attention to it, and it can actually be kind of helpful for some people. Other ones is like adapting your sleep environment. And so making sure that your room temperature, if you can, is not too hot, or getting a fan. That white noise sometimes can really help people. Maybe purchasing blinds or putting a blanket even over your window so that it's darker, so you can kind of get that rhythm, right? Your body process to kind of figure that out. And then again, develop a new routine, which Dalton kind of talked about. Those are some of the kind of big things that you can do that's going to directly affect your sleep, which we know directly affects your health. And so that's all I had for you guys. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Let me look. Let's see. Let's see. This was one thing that I was curious about, because I know that blue light contributes heavily to preventing melatonin production. And I was wondering if based on that, since we can basically now control how much light we're exposed to at all times of the day, like it doesn't have to be sun-based anymore, if you could basically set up your routine however you wanted to, and also could potentially help yourself in like on nights where your routine is going to be off, in maintaining something close to the routine. It's like if you know you're going to be out later, just making sure you're exposed to light until right before you go to bed, and then having like making your room as dark as possible, so that you can sleep for the normal expected amount of time.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I think you can adapt it, right? We have those abilities, we have the technology to do that. And so it can be challenging when like you go outside and the physical day is dark, right? You can't control that. And I think sometimes like that drive home, or if you are staying up late, like that can kind of affect it. But I do agree that you can manipulate your environment to actually make sure you're still getting quality of sleep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is true. I mean, shift workers, you have like shut out blinds. The only thing that contributes is you can't manipulate the actual environment, like the actual nature. And so that is the only thing that kind of contributes to it. But you're right, you can manipulate those other things.
I was also wondering if you still if you have access to those studies where they like the original papers for where they showed that how sleep rhythm can take years off your life.
I have them saved on my computer, so I'll email them to you. I have your email. Do you have any numbers in your email?
No, it's just normal email, or just name. Yeah.
I didn't know, and so I didn't send you also the one we talked about last meeting. And so I will send you that stuff I found from our last meeting, as well as those articles.
Ooh, okay, that sounds good. Sweet. And then I think I had one more thing, but let me check. Oh yeah, so there was one other thing that I was interested in. On a slide a while back, you showed like an image that you would normally get on like a sleep monitor thing, that in part showed that you're not going into the deeper parts of sleep as you get closer to the like 7th and 8th hours. And I was curious, if you're not going into those parts of sleep, why do you think it is that 7 to 8 hours is what's shown to be beneficial, if most of the time when you're getting that effect is around the 6-hour mark?
Yeah. I think it shows that, and it's not true to everybody. I think that's like a typical rhythm. And so some people do get into deep sleep later. And so it's shown that if you are in deep sleep and you wake up, you're going to be 10 times more tired than when you wake up from light sleep. So that's like that's just like your body process is when your brain is in your lighter sleep, and when you wake up, you're going to feel better. And so we don't need lots of deep sleep. We only need a small amount, right? It doesn't need to be our entire sleep routine. And so how I've kind of was taught in OT school is that you get what you need, right? You're kind of going through that sleep debt. And then as you get closer, you are reaching what your biological body needs. And then that's why it's lighter. So when you wake up, you're going to feel better than if you're in a deep sleep and you're still kind of in that sleep debt, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, awesome. If we don't have any other questions, here's a feedback form. I'll put it in the chat. Dalton, I'll email it to you since you're kind of on the go. I'll just add it in that email I'm going to send you.
Yes, thank you. That sounds good. I'm happy to do that. All right, I got to take off. I got a meeting in like 3 minutes, so I got to run.
Okay.
But thank you for this. I really appreciated it.
Thanks for coming. And then if anybody wanted to talk more, feel free to send me an email. My email's on the screen, as well as you can email Erin Colburn about a drop-in advising, or we can set up a time to talk if you want to learn more about mental health or any of these topics, or if you just want to learn more about occupational therapy from a student. Thanks for coming, guys. Our next one is going to be Monday at 9 a.m. next Monday, and it's going to be on burnout.